What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking the February 12, 2022 edition of Talking Smack, featuring, as always, Jackie Redmond, Matt Camp in the studio, being joined by their host for this week, their co-host for this week, Peter Rosenberg, whose analysis I don't ordinarily love, but I will say he was a bit better this week than he normally is, because usually he says stuff that is just flat out either wrong or stupid, and he just says that to get a reaction. I think Sam Roberts does that, I think, more than Peter Rosenberg does, but Rosenberg does it as well. I feel like he kind of spoke more as to what I was thinking. Not that, I agree with him, so it was better, but I don't know. I feel like he didn't have that typical WWE stance as much as usual. And if anything, Matt Camp did on this episode, so we'll get into that. But yeah, to start it off, they run down the biggest headlines from Friday's show. And they talk about how Cole had brought up to Goldberg during a sit-down interview with him backstage. He had told Goldberg, people are saying that it's one comeback too many for you, which is why you won't win the Universal Championship at Elimination Chamber, which is true. And Jackie asks Peter, do you think it's been one, do you agree with that? Do you think it's been one comeback too many for Goldberg? And I was fully expecting him to say, no, not at all, he'll take the championship, Goldberg is still Goldberg, he can go in there and beat blah, blah, blah. But he actually said yes, and I was very surprised to hear him say that. Do not put Peter Rosenberg anywhere near Goldberg. He may just murder him. But then again, Goldberg even said in that segment on SmackDown, I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm sure he doesn't give a fuck what Peter Rosenberg thinks. I'm sure he doesn't give a fuck what I think. And I'm sure that's a shoot. But it's true. It's one comeback too many. The man's doing it for money, and that's great. I'm sure he does enjoy it. But there's no reason to continue putting him in World Championship matches. This one makes sense because they were supposed to do it 2 years ago and they didn't, whatever. But there is no debating that the man looks worse and worse in the ring each time he comes back. Hopefully Elimination Chamber is a good match from Goldberg and not a bad match. Very hit or miss. But Matt Camp tried to kind of go off of what Rosenberg said and kind of disagree with him and say, well, he did beat Bobby Lashley. Or no. Actually, Rosenberg, before Camp even disagreed, he said, listen, the Lashley matches proved that it's not the same Goldberg. He did not look good in there. He lost the first one in an embarrassing fashion. He didn't even get pinned. He, got an injury or something, which I know was a storyline thing, I believe, but it just wasn't good. Camp doesn't agree. He's like, I think that's the thing. The Lashley matches that you mentioned do prove that it's not one comeback too many, because he beat the current WWE champion at Crown Jewel, which is factually correct. But really on that one, he got fucking lucky. And at SummerSlam, he looked like shit. At the Rumble, he lost. At WrestleMania 36 or whatever, he lost there too. So let's not gloss over that fact. Camp says that Roman cannot take Goldberg lightly. Rosenberg says, well, one thing that you mentioned that you kind of glossed over, Matt, was the fact that you're right. It has been 2 years. Goldberg is now 2 years older. He is not capable physically of the same things now that he was 2 years ago, which, again, is factually true. The man is older. Roman is older as well, but he's better than he was. He's still in the prime, the peak of his career at the moment. Goldberg has shown in those Bobby Lashley matches specifically, even at Crown Jewel, which was a better Goldberg match than I was expecting, but the man is just very limited with what he can do, and I enjoy Goldberg, but they should really have him in there not doing competitive matches, but instead squashing people like Corbin, Dolph, people like that. 2-minute squashes is really what you should have Goldberg doing against people that make sense for him to be squashing. Not The Fiend, and that match was complete shit anyway. You know what I mean? So, anyway, I actually agreed with Rosenberg here. Camp was trying to toe the company line and say, well, he looked great. It's going to be a tough challenge for Roman Elimination Chamber, which I guess, but realistically, with the run that Roman Reigns is on, and Goldberg being a fucking dinosaur at this point, realistically, Roman should run through this man in Elimination Chamber and put him back in the retirement home. He's not going to, but it would make sense if he did, because Goldberg is just not anywhere near Roman's level. I'm glad they're doing the match. It makes sense to do the match. If we want to be fair here, though, Roman should go in there and mop the floor with Goldberg. Realistically. I know that's probably not going to happen, though. Back in the studio, they recap Happy Corbin versus Cesaro, which was won by Corbin. Whatever. They also replay the backstage segment between Drew McIntyre and Madcap Moss, where McIntyre basically threatened Moss to say, hey, cut it out with the fake injury shit. I'm going to beat your ass in a Falls Count Anywhere match at Elimination Chamber next weekend. We hear backstage from Moss and Corbin with Megan Moran, and Corbin stresses that he is undefeated at the moment, which is true. They mentioned that on SmackDown. and they're going to go throw a victory party. But before then, they have to make sure that Moss is ready for Drew in Saudi Arabia at Elimination Chamber next weekend. And Megan brings up to Moss, well, are you trying to dodge having a match with Drew? Basically saying what we're all thinking here and what was implied. Are you trying to get out of the match with Drew by faking this eye injury? And Moss gets very offended at her question, and he says, listen, I just got my stitches removed. It's very much a real injury, and we're going to make Drew pay for what he did to me in that Falls Count Anywhere match come Elimination Chamber. And we have history with beating him up all over the arena, because remember, they attacked him backstage at day one about a month ago. So they've beaten him backstage before, and they're going to do it again in Saudi Arabia. Maybe they could take the fight to the Prince or whatever if he's there watching. That would be quite entertaining. Back in the studio, they replay the finish to the Natalya versus Aaliyah Dungeon-style showdown, which they never referenced on TV, but they did quite a bit online. They also recap the New Day versus Los Lotharios match, which was won by Los Lotharios. Big win for them. They talked about how big of a win it is for Angel and Humberto to be beating Kofi Kingston and Big E, who are two former WWE champions in their own right. We hear backstage from Humberto and Angel on the Los Lotharios, the Lethal Lovers, as they're calling them now. And not because they're Jay Lethal fans, but because I guess they are lethal lovers, and they'll kiss whoever they want, and hopefully it's consensual and whatever. But anyway, Humberto had said that they weren't on the same page last week, which is why they lost. But they did win this week, and that's all that matters. And then Angel Garza brings up, and I'm going to call him Angel Garza because that's what he is to me, not just Angel, which is weird. But they said, our win this week was a present for Valentine's Day. And then they bring in all these boxes of chocolates in the shape of a heart and these flowers. And Megan's like, oh, you shouldn't have. And Angel's like, well, they're not for you. They're for us, from our fans. And they do give Megan, they do throw her a bone by giving her a rose on the way out. So that was nice of Angel and Humberto to do. Back in the studio, Jackie and Matt recap the Usos attacking the Viking Raiders backstage. And Camp says that the Raiders do pose a threat, and they've won gold everywhere they've been, the Raw Tag Team titles, the NXT Tag Team titles, the New Japan Tag titles, Ring of Honor Tag titles, which the Raiders have mentioned on SmackDown or TV before. I remember them mentioning Ring of Honor a while ago. And I think they mentioned New Japan as well. They haven't mentioned it on Talking Smack, I don't think, but I remember the Raiders mentioning that years ago when they won the Raw Tag Team titles. They were like, oh yeah, we were NXT Tag Team champions, we were Ring of Honor Tag Team champions, and all this other shit. I don't think they're winning the SmackDown Tag Team titles, at least not yet, but it is cool they brought that up. And they do mention the Usos might be intimidated by that challenge, although they will probably emerge victorious, as they always do, come Elimination Chamber. Matt Camp says that DeVille suspending Rousey was actually justified, given what Rousey did to DeVille last week. It is funny, and I mentioned this in my audio review of SmackDown from yesterday. But of all the times for Sonya to get reprimanded by Adam Pearce and the authority figures in WWE and storyline and Mr. McMahon and whatever, why now, when Rousey legit did something she should not have done, and I know Sonya was in her way, she probably shouldn't have tried to break her fucking arm, though, that was the weird thing. When they tried to suspend her and give Rousey what she had coming to her, that's when they reprimanded Sonya and said, listen, what you say doesn't matter. But what she's been doing and abusing Naomi with for the past 8 months doesn't matter, but this does, that's what I didn't understand. So I'm glad Matt Camp brought that up. They recap the excellent Charlotte Flair versus Naomi match and the post-match angle that set up Charlotte and Sonya versus Naomi and Ronda for Elimination Chamber in a tag team match. Camp stresses that Naomi looked really good in defeat in this match, and I would agree. We hear backstage real quickly from Charlotte. This was like a 30-second interview. Charlotte said with that when she proved why she's the opportunity, and that as far as, because when Megan brings up, oh, are you intimidated at all by Ronda and Naomi being on the opposite end of the ring of you? Of you or whatever, facing you in that match. And Charlotte says, well, I just beat Naomi, and Ronda's never beaten me. So what does that tell you? And then that was the end of the interview. And she's right. I don't think Naomi's ever beaten Charlotte. Charlotte's beaten her now 3 times in 2022. And then, unless there was a DQ win in there somewhere, which I don't think there was. But not only that, but we've never seen Ronda beat Charlotte, which is true. They had one-on-one match, the triple threat at WrestleMania 35, that neither of them won. But at WrestleMania, or rather at Survivor Series 2018, Ronda beat Charlotte. She beat her, or rather, Charlotte beat her by disqualification. Or no, wait a second. No, Ronda did win that match by DQ. Charlotte was the one who attacked her with the kendo stick. So technically, Ronda has beaten Charlotte. She's just never pinned her. So that is factual. They hype up that tag team match for Elimination Chamber, which was made official on WWE.com and on Twitter, social media, after the show went off the air. Peter Rosenberg says he's excited for the match because we get to see more of Naomi and Deville, as well as Rousey and Flair as a preview before the WrestleMania matchup for the SmackDown Women's Championship. He admits that he has a bit of a bias for Deville. He doesn't know if it's because of the way that she dresses or just respects her, but, he is worried for her because she will be in the ring with Ronda Rousey, and, for years they played up, Sonya's a former MMA fighter. Nowhere near the level of Ronda Rousey, so, any threat that Sonya poses to Ronda will be thrown out the window come Elimination Chamber, because she's just, as an authority figure lately, not as an in-ring competitor, she's just nowhere near her level. But Matt Camp says, he is excited to see Sonya back in the ring come Elimination Chamber. And the last thing that she'll want to do in her in-ring return following her one-off match with Naomi last month is face Ronda Rousey. And as far as which team is stronger, Jackie puts both guys on the spot and says, which team do you think is stronger? Rosenberg has to come up with a quick answer, and he says, Rousey and Naomi. You can't bet against Ronda Rousey. Matt Camp, I think, just for simply the sake of disagreeing with him and offering an opposing viewpoint, says, Charlotte and Deville. It's clearly Charlotte and Deville. They're more powerful. They're just a better team. Can't bet against Charlotte, which, whatever. Deville hasn't wrestled consistently in years, so why the fuck you would go Rousey and Naomi, or why you would go with Charlotte and Deville over Rousey and Naomi, I have no idea. But that's Matt Camp just being a fucking stooge for the show. But that was Talking Smack in a nutshell for February 12th, 2022. Decent stuff, really. Nothing to go out of your way to see. We had Los Lotharios on the show, Charlotte Flair. Who was the other person they interviewed? Was that it? They talked to, the Corbin and Moss too, which was just annoying. I like Corbin, but this happy Corbin shit and Madcap Moss has just completely jumped the shark for me. But like I said, guys, that's about it. So thank you as always for checking out my reviews of Talking Smack here on the channel. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We'll be back on Monday with another review, or another interview rather. I'm hoping to put in my interview tomorrow with the number one contender to the NXT Championship, Santos Escobar. It's going to be up tomorrow, so or Tuesday, probably. Hopefully tomorrow, though, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, guys, have an awesome rest of your weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl tonight if you're watching. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.